Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a comedian all the way from Buffalo, New York, and he's also a podcaster. His name is Max Kaczor. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Max?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm living the dream. I'm doing well. I'm just happy to be doing this today. So that's where my mind is going to go. You're a comedian, so I'm hoping you can make me laugh a lot today, because I need it.
I'll try. I'll try my best.
No pressure, man. No pressure. Yeah, what prompted you to get into comedy, man? Everyone's got a different story. Talk us through your journey of becoming a comedian. Like, why did you choose to become one?
Yeah, so comedy, like growing up, comedy, stand-up comedy and stuff like that was always a big part. Like my dad got me into like Sam Kinison and Don Rickles, like some older American comedians. And then as I got older, I always just watched stand-up. I went to stand-up shows, and then I've been living in Spain for the last few years, back in the States now doing some fun visa stuff, bureaucracy. But when I was living in Madrid, a good friend of mine there is a stand-up comedian, so I would go to his shows like every week, and then every week it was very much like, oh, I could probably do that. Oh, I'll do that next week. I'll try next time. And then eventually he was just like, hey, either do it or shut up. Like I don't want to just hear you talk about it, doing it all the time, so just do it. And then I was like, all right, cool. So I started writing jokes, and then finally, February of 2020, I got onto a show, and it was I was expecting it to be like a random open mic situation where like no one was gonna be there,
Right.
and it ended up being a benefit show for the charity Madrid for Refugees, and it was sold out. So there was like 70 people there,
Oh, damn.
and I was second to headliner, and I was like, okay, this is, just throwing me right in the deep end. Let's go. And I like the host, I was like, I've never done stand up before, and she's like, yeah, okay. And I was like, all right. It's like, I guess I'm either gonna sink or swim. Let's see what happens. And it didn't go terribly, which was cool. Um, and then I got the bug at that point, so I got booked on another show in March, but it happened to be March 14th, 2020, when everything in
Oh,
Spain
yeah.
closed. And then stand up was basically illegal for like a year and a half. So I just didn't get up again until I moved to Barcelona. And then I was getting up like every day doing spots and just working it all out. And I've been, yeah, basically since October 11th, 2021, it's been almost every day.
Damn, man. Originally brought you to Spain? How come you were there?
So I graduated university in the spring of 2017, and I knew I didn't want to go join the workforce yet.
Yeah.
So I've been working at summer camps most of my life. So I contacted an old director of mine and was like, "Hey, do you know any camps in Europe that'll hire me for the summer?" And he put me in contact with some people, and I ended up working at an English immersion camp in France. And then while working there, I met my friend Jake, the comedian from Madrid, and he was like, "Here's this program to teach English in Madrid." And I was like, "Okay, just hang out in a classroom and live in Spain for a year, done." And so it was kind of just like it was just delaying, extending the college style of life and delaying the beginning of the real world stuff,
delaying
basically.
delaying the inevitable.
Exactly, exactly.
Talk us through like what, because I know comedy shows vary as far as like how you get paid and stuff like that. Is it like a standard shot? Is it based on how many people you get through the door? Like how's that work?
So yeah, there's a couple different ones. It's primarily based on time. So like the standard paid show, you're probably gonna do about 10 minutes,
Hmm.
or you have to have at least 10 minutes of material prepared. And then for that, you could be paid anything from like 15 to 20 bucks, 20 euro, 20 something like that. That's kind of like the universal standard for that. But then there are like in New York and in London and Los Angeles and the bigger cities, they do have bringer shows, which is you basically they give you flyers that have like a mark on them for you, like specific. So like they might have your name on the back. And so you got to go out and hand out those flyers. You're barking in the street like, "Hey, come to the show! Hey, come to the show! Hey, come to the show!" And however
Ah, yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
of those come through the door, because they check them like, "Oh, did you get a flyer from somebody?" It's like, "All right, here's Max's tick," and then you get paid a little bit more based on that.
That's mad that you got to promote yourself, man. That's so weird. I don't know
It's
why I find that
yeah,
odd. It's like, hey, come see me perform. I get it, but it's just do you know what? Now you mention it, I think I've met people doing that in London, in Leicester Square, because there's quite a few comedy clubs there.
yeah,
And there's a place that I actually went to, which had about 3 to 5 different comics, and 2 of them were brilliant, and the others were the shits. And yeah, it's fine. Like everyone's learning, it's experiences, right?
yeah.
But there's like a noticeable difference. And I do actually recall that one of them that I saw on stage had previously given me a flyer. So it's just
Oh,
funny.
really?
But I get it. You start when you're starting out. I mean, you just everything's self promotion. I mean, like right
Well,
now, that's how
yeah,
it is with me. Like I'm doing literally everything myself, and I wish I had staff, to be honest.
exactly. Well, and that's yeah, no, that's the same with our podcast. It's like, okay, this would be really cool to pay someone else to do this, but
Yeah.
um, it's also like for the booker, for whoever puts you on the show, if they don't know you, they need to know that you can do something. If you're not funny, you can at least bring people, you know?
In terms of like actually getting shows, how much of it would you say is about who you know versus, maybe notoriety, or like how is there a lot of like outreach involved? Because I mean, I can kind of relate because I come from the music industry previously,
Right.
so I know there's a lot of outreach initially trying to reach people and whatnot. But like, how does it work for comedy?
It's I think it's probably super similar to the music industry, whereas like in the first probably 2 3 years, it's 100% you doing it on your own and trying to reach out to as many people, posting content, getting anything out there that shows you're actually like a credible person. Um, and then it's just a lot of like making sure you're a good person. Like it's not necessarily you trying to reach out and get out to all these people. It's just like showing that you're putting in the work, you're showing up to the open mics, working out new material, you're not being rude to bar people at the venues, you're not being rude to other comics. Like you got to be a genuine person.
Have you
Because
seen a lot of
whoever,
that?
I mean, you run into like people getting a little cocky. Like if you have one good show, it's like, all right, I'm hot shit. I don't need to do anything. I'm the best of the best. And it's like, I've had a lot of good shows, but I've also had a lot of bad shows. Like I know exactly where I am on the totem pole.
You got to share some stories with me about this, man. Like, we'll go into your personal experiences in a second, but
Yeah,
like, I got to know like of people, other people you've met, because I meet a lot of people from a lot of different industries, and sometimes there is a little bit of that big league and crap, and like like
right.
I'm the best, I'm too good to talk to you, all that shit.
Yeah.
Um, what have been your experiences? What stands out or was most memorable?
It's like a lot because I've had the opportunity. I've done stand up in Spain, in New York, in Chicago, in
Damn.
places in Texas and Boston, and like just a subtle flex.
Damn, no,
Um,
I'm flex all you want, man. That's the whole point of what this show is.
exactly.
It's promotion. Promote yourself. Why not?
It's a lot of like the most of the I will say before I step on anyone's feet, a lot of the people in Buffalo and a lot of the people, most of the people in Buffalo, most of the people in Barcelona that I interact with are great people. They're very good comedians. They're very supportive. They'll help you write jokes. They'll help you get on shows and everything like that. But then when you get to places like New York City or Chicago that have a million people trying to do the same thing,
Right.
it's a lot of like the old heads, the guys that have been doing it for 10, 15 years, and they're not on club shows. They're on like that dive bar show,
Oh
you know?
no. Oh, so you've got like some begrudging old guy who's bitter and
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I never made it." And that kind of
Well, it's like, oh, I used to write jokes with that person. I used to, Jerry, I used to do stuff with Jerry. And it's like, okay, good, but now you don't.
Have you ever heard of a guy called Stuttering John by any chance?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
There's this guy. I can't believe I'm bringing this up. So, shout out to What Are These Podcasts? This podcast that I listen to. Where these guys basically just shit on podcasts. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're really brutal. I will say that, but a lot of it is kind of fair. But they also talk a lot about Stuttering John, Anthony and Opie, if you're familiar with them,
Yeah.
and they've all kind of gone their separate ways. But basically, the significance of this is that back in the day, when we're talking like 80s, 90s, whatever, Stuttering John was a character, a guy that used to appear on the Howard Stern show. And of course, a lot of those guys around that era all used to work with each other, appear on each other's shows, whatever the case may be. But, um, everyone has their time in the spotlight. Some people continue to be in the spotlight, some people don't. And then some people fall into what you were just mentioning, this kind of pool of irrelevancy, which again, it's not a problem. It's not a bad thing. I'm not throwing any stones, but some
Yeah.
people take it well, transition into other things, use what they made before and turn that into something else. And some people sit and get begrudging about it and get annoyed and either try and live in the past or they get annoyed because things haven't worked out. And I always just find that really interesting. Like, I think if you're at that point, like I've had this conversation with myself as well, because I've been trying to pursue acting for a couple of years now, and I've been doing the podcast a couple of years, and to be honest, things haven't really worked out. And that's just kind of how it is sometimes. But one thing that I've been reminded by, but the people that listen to the show, people that support me online or whatever, is that you got to do it for the right reasons. You got to love what you do.
Exactly.
And like, ironically, through doing that, that's how you'll get attention and you'll get people interested in what you're doing. It's not by posting 1,000 clips a day like that. Sure, that stuff helps, but like, or doing like 10 shows a week or whatever. If you're a comedian, it's about working hard on your craft, enjoying what you do, and I think confidence as well. Like I love comedy. I've been watching comedy ever since I was a young kid, and one thing I've always noticed is that the best comedians make it seem effortless.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I look at like a Dave Chappelle, like he's not even really doing comedy anymore. He's just walking around telling funny stories,
Mm-hmm.
or even just storytelling, which to me I love that. But I get it's not always comedy, but it's when there's like different levels to it, and obviously there's
Yeah.
different styles and whatnot, and it's a really fascinating field, which brings me to my next question. Actually, what's your style? Are you doing one-liners? Are you doing more conversational? Are you picking on the crowd? Like, what's your style?
Uh, I do pick on the crowd. And it
Who's your
gets me in
go-to?
trouble sometimes. Anyone who's just like there.
Guy with
Like
the
I
pointy
don't like
ears. Hey, you in the shirt in the front row.
basically like it's just I think just my upbringing, like growing up with my family, we just kind of roasted each other all the time, but like not in a mean way, just kind of like you pick on the little things and stuff like that. And so I do that. I mean, I do that to everyone I know. And then I did it once on stage and it worked. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, let's keep this doing. I always, the thing with comedy is you try to find the line and then you try to go over the line, but you don't want to go too far over because then, it gets really bad really quick. But from what I've done so far, from what I've said to people so far, is that everyone's real kind of cool with it to a point. And the thing is, like, you have to be really aware of where that point is once you get there. Because, like, you can say something to someone and it just hits them the wrong way. And it's like, okay, we're going to move on to something else now. But I don't do that all the time. I do a lot of, like, observational stuff. I actually started with storytelling, and I was trying to do stories because most open mic spots are about 5 minutes.
Mm,
And it's quite difficult to tell a good story in 5 minutes.
sure.
And then my friend Hannah out in Barcelona one day was just kind of like, "Hey Max, have you ever just told jokes?" And I was like, "Oh no." And she goes, "Hmm." And I was like, "Okie dokie." And I don't think she definitely didn't mean, and I've talked to her about it, like she definitely didn't mean it in a bad way, but it was just kind of like, "Oh, you've been doing this a lot longer than I am, and you've seen like stories are good, but you need jokes in the story. So now with like a longer set, you develop the through line to tell the story,
Sure.
but you work out the jokes before it. So now I do a lot of just like observational stuff based around a theme so that when I have a longer, like a 10, 15, 20-minute set, I can tell the entire story. And it's a lot, but yeah, 100%. Hannah did the right thing by just saying, that one day.
I just love how blunt everyone is in Europe. Like, it's,
Yeah,
like everywhere I've been in Europe, like everyone's just like honest. You get
yeah,
honesty, but just
yeah.
blunt, and it's like there's none of the dressing up stuff that Americans and English people do. There's none of that. It's just like, no, deal with it, buddy.
Just this is something you should do.
Damn.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like, have you ever considered doing comedy? Like when you're already doing it. Like,
You ever thought about
when does the comedy start, buddy?
exactly.
Okay, you're talking about times when when you've dealt with people in the crowd, heckles and stuff like that. Talk us through some of the times when you've maybe messed up or when a interaction's gone bad, and what happened. How did you deal with it?
Yeah. I think it was at I think it was at an open mic the other day. It just
Oh,
because a
recent.
lot of yeah,
Damn.
it happens often. Just because like the people that come to open mics are other comics
Oh.
and their friends and whoever's just at the bar.
See, that's a different kind of show though, because that's an audience of your peers. So then that must be
Correct.
really tough.
It's open mics, I think, are one of the hardest parts of comedy because you're trying to make people who do what you do laugh.
Of course, yeah. It's just like music, where
Yeah.
okay, when I was used to play regularly live, a lot of the time, yeah, there wouldn't be anyone in the audience. It might be one or two people, but mostly it's just you're playing to the bands who don't care about your set. They're just waiting to play.
Yeah.
So,
And that's like it's because I people ask, I talk about it a lot, but it's like at an open mic, up until I perform, I'm thinking about my set.
right.
I'll chit chat for a little bit, but like I'm thinking about what I'm gonna say on the stage. So I don't listen very like sometimes I'll catch what people on stage are saying, but I think 80% of the time I'm not listening. And it's not like in a rude way. It's just like I have to pay attention to what I'm gonna do, or else I'm gonna get up there and just eat it, and it's not gonna be good for me or anybody, you know. And I can't, I don't speak for everybody, but from who I've talked to, that's very similar. It's like once you've performed, it doesn't matter. You can listen, you can talk, you do whatever
Sure.
you want, but right up until that moment, I think it's probably the same like for if you have a role, like before you act, before your scene is there, you're not the same you're paying attention to what you're going to say because you have to do it, and then after it, it's like, okay, all done, here we go, let's party.
That's very true. I never thought about that, but I just didn't realize that comedians have to deal with that because I feel like that's even more brutal. Because
Yeah,
at least when like it's musicians watching other musicians, you can still kind of appreciate it to some degree. Whereas I suppose, not to say you wouldn't be critical because you might be, but I don't know.
yeah,
It just feels like the medium's different. Like if I was a comedian on stage in front of a bunch of comedians and I'm trying to make it, I would just feel like intense pressure in that situation.
well, you do, that's exactly it. It's like it's basically like if you're performing music in front of your all the music teachers you've ever had, your parents, you're
Yeah.
performing in front of your peers, so you want to do well because you want their approval, and you also for the handful of audience members that are there, you need them to also laugh, but you can't focus on like one party too much because the jokes I say to comedians are probably a bit different than what I say to an audience member, because it's like when you're speaking to a comedian, you can kind of speak in shorthand, like in code, because they get what you're saying or what you're trying to do. Whereas like the joke I say to an audience member is going to be much more elaborate, a bit more explained and broken down like that. Um, but yeah, back from the tangent. The other day I was at a mic, and there was just a drunk guy, and he was just like they were just talking the whole time, and it's just like,
Ah.
you know, it's one of those things where it's like they're at their regular bar, and I also happen to be there that night trying to do something.
Do you not think
So
about like
we're
trying to incorporate it though? Just be like, I don't know, like, hey buddy, Let us in on the conversation. I
Well,
don't know.
you try, yeah,
Like, do you want a
you do
megaphone?
practice stuff like that. You try to do that, but then sometimes it just doesn't hit. Because like there are times where it's like if you pick up on what they're saying, you can join into the conversation. Or if like, you address it, they realize what's happening and they get quiet or participate or whatever. But then there's other times where like you try to address it and it just doesn't work, and then the room is kind of lost. It's just a little awkward. It's like, okay, let's reel it back in or try and see what happens. But I don't know. I usually just like in circumstances where if I'm getting heckled, I think last week there was a very drunk guy at a show, and the host came up and he was like, "Hey, he's been heckling everybody. Try to do something with it." So
Oh,
I just abandoned all material and just like started talking to him and just roasted him. And the thing is, like, because that's all he wants. He wants to get made fun of. He wants to be a part of the show.
yeah,
And if you do that, then they usually get quiet after.
yeah.
But there's also been times where you do that and then they're like, I'm part of the show now. And then the next comedian comes up and they just get worse and worse because they're like, well, that guy did it. So why don't you do it? It's like, well, they're different comedians. They're different people. They do different stuff.
So,
But
okay, best performance ever and why? And then worst performance ever and why?
I've had
How many have you done so far? Must be quite a
a
few.
lot. I mean, like in terms of like an actual booked showcase performance, probably 20 or so. But then for like an open mic, like in just getting on stage
Mm.
and doing 3 to 5 minutes of material, well into the hundreds.
Damn. Okay. Fair play.
Um, but I think my best like booked show was probably there's a show. So here in Buffalo, there's a big old church, and it's called Asbury Hall, and it's the folk singer Annie DeFranco. I believe she's also from Buffalo, but we can fact check that one. Um, the church, I think, was gonna be demolished. Something was gonna happen to the church, and then Ani DeFranco bought it. So it's coined the church that Ani DeFranco saved. So it's a big music venue. Like Dimitri Martin was there, Vampire Weekend played there, like big bands.
Oh,
It's a huge, because it's the sanctuary. Um, but in the basement is a small, probably 80 to 100 capacity room called Babeville. And that room, just for some reason, I think like it's just the location, the way the show is booked, everything about it. It's just every time it's a hot room. It's a great show. And I was on that show in July, and it was the first show that my parents had ever seen me do.
oh
And
wow.
it just was like it was 10 minutes and it was just hot, 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 hot the whole time. And you get off and you're just like, that was sick. I'm the best comedian ever. Everything's great. And then you go to an open mic the next day and it's awful. But it was just such a good show. And it's like every comedian you talk to in Buffalo will say that's the hottest room just because of I don't know, it's just like the perfect storm situation every month. It's a great place. Yeah.
How about your worst show ever?
Worst show, I don't know, every day. No.
Nah, I mean, you seem very confident. You've done a lot of shows, and
Yeah.
it seems like you're dealing well with like the more negative instances, which you would need to be able to do. But
Well, that's the thing. It's like you're gonna do good and you're gonna do poorly, and you just have to be okay with it. And you have to learn from the poor. You have to learn from the good to see what happened, but you also have to learn from the poor to see what happened. Um, there was one, so like starting out in Spain, a lot of the shows, a lot of the mics and a lot of the shows had big audiences of non-comics, which was really surprising. Like, so I got used to performing in front of people. And then I did a show there and no one showed up. So it was my first
mm,
time performing in front of nobody, which is not an uncommon thing in like early years of comedy. But when you're used to something and then all of a sudden it's not, I didn't know how to handle the silence.
So yeah, so like okay, the sound engineer's there, and then that's it, right?
And the other comics that are on the show, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And like
yeah.
a spattering of other people. But like
Okay.
it's real, like it was, I think it's like a 40 capacity room, 7 people were in it.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like professional wrestling, isn't it? Like you just got to do your best. If it's 70,000 or 7 people,
Exactly,
like you got to
exactly. But like
approach it the same
I
way.
was, I was a handful of weeks into it and I just
Ooh.
didn't, I would say a joke and then nothing would happen, or it was just like tiny little
Oh,
laughs. And it was just like, okay, I don't know how to handle this.
I
And
was gonna say,
so
like, do you laugh it off? Like, how do you personally deal with
now, yes,
it?
you kind of like, you gotta not, because that on that show specifically, I got into my own head about it and I was like, you're not doing well, you're doing poorly, you're not gonna be a good person, you're gonna be a terrible comedian. Like while I'm on stage, and it's like, okay. And I ended up, I think I was supposed to do 8 minutes maybe, and I did five, and I just left. I was like, I've run out of jokes.
Did you say that? So, like, I'm sorry, I've got nothing.
I was just like, all right, thank you. And then I went off stage, and like the host was like, why did you finish so early? I was like, I don't have anything else. Like,
Yeah.
and I showed her my notes, and I was like, this is every joke that I've written. And I just, it was
Oh,
gone, all
bless your
gone.
heart.
It's
Oh my
like,
god.
I think that's the one difference, because like writing jokes, writing music, performing jokes, performing music, there's a lot of similarities. But the
Yeah.
thing is, like, if I'm standing on stage with a guitar, unless I hit the wrong note, I'm not gonna bomb.
Yeah.
No one can be there. You don't necessarily need a reaction to play 3 minutes of music. You're gonna have 3 minutes of music anyway. But my 10 minutes of jokes is 15 minutes if they're laughing, or it's 6 minutes if no one's laughing.
That's the
you
thing. Like,
know?
what that your I was gonna say art form, but yeah, we can call it art form.
Yeah.
Your form of art, like, is so heavily dependent on audience reaction and participation. Like, again, sorry to bring it back to wrestling. Big
Yeah.
fan of wrestling, but what during the pandemic there was like no fans, and it was like the first time this has ever happened, with the exception of empty arena matches, which were done on purpose. And it was
Mm.
just a really odd kind of spectacle to see all this stuff being performed that we would otherwise regularly see, and we were almost like trained to have a response to it, or trained to hear the audience response to it. And
Exactly.
there's just nothing. And then like there's other instances as well. Like I don't know if you've ever watched Friends without the laughter track on.
Yeah.
It's just pain. It's like
It's really weird.
you start to realize like how well conditioned we are, and actually how some of the jokes aren't even that funny. They're just kind of like dead, and they fall.
Well, and that's the thing. That's like with, yeah, like wrestling, it's such a huge crowd participation thing, because
Sure.
like football,
Yep.
basketball, baseball can all be played with no one watching. You
Yeah.
know, you're just doing it. But like
Still
wrestling,
weird though.
still weird. But like, if Kane does a suplex on somebody and then goes like that and it's silent, he just looks like a weirdo, you
Yeah.
know? And that was the big thing with the pandemic, because um people started doing Zoom comedy.
Yeah.
And it's for I never did one, but from what I heard, it was like you would just say a joke and then you would just see like 50 screens of smiles, because they're all muted because you don't want to be distracting.
Oh, that's so weird.
There's a really funny clip. Um it's similar to the Friends thing. It's, do you know Jimmy Fallon?
Yeah.
He, when the pandemic started and he had to host his show from his house, he
Oh
would
yeah.
still do his monologue in his, like, living room. And it was really weird because he'll just do it and there's nothing. And you can see on his face, because he's a stand-up, he's an improviser, you can, like, he knows he needs that laugh, and you can kind of see him like working it out on his face, like, how long do I wait?
It'd be so funny as well if he went like, "Hey, how about those Democrats, eh?"
Right, it just,
Nothing, not.
anything, and it's like his daughter, like, yeah. Yeah,
uh,
it's super weird.
I live for stuff like that. The more awkward, the better. It's just funny as fuck.
Yeah.
um, just speaking a little bit more on like audiences and shows and stuff, do you have any sort of like funny heckler stories, either from your personal experiences or watching other shows of other comedians, anything like that at all?
Um, yeah, there's this comedian. His name's Big J Okerson. He's an American comedian, and he's on the show called Legion of Skanks. He has the Bonfire. He's a big comedian, but his material is a lot of crowd work based. Like he has a lot of material, but he's also just such a good crowd worker, talking to the crowd, doing stuff like that. And I saw him here in Buffalo a few weeks back, and just the way, not necessarily like one thing in particular, but just watching him work was like a master class, because because there's like different kinds of crowd work. There's a crowd work where you're just riffing immediately on what they're saying, and then there's like guided crowd work where you kind of say like, oh, has anybody had a breakup recently? Because in the back of his mind he has a joke about breakups that he's going to
Yeah.
get to, but he's going to guide the crowd work to that joke without that person knowing, and like that kind of stuff. He does that a lot. And he was telling this story about, um I'm butchering it, but I think it was about beating up cops. But like it's it was like, could you beat up like 1,000 male cops or 1,000 female cops or something like that? And the guy, he was just talking to just some random dude in the audience about it. And the responses that they were getting, I think it's part of his new hour. So if you're seeing this, spoiler alert. Um, but it was just such a funny thing because the guy in the audience obviously has never thought of that before. And all of a sudden Jay's like, so do you think you could do it? Do you think you could beat up 1,000 police officers with this situation? And the guy's just like, I think I could. And he's like, you think you could? Like, why? Because I don't. And it was just stuff like that. And then this dude Stavros Halcyus, he's from New York, and I saw him a couple weeks back, and he does a lot of just kind of riffing crowd work. And there was a moment where he was talking to a kid in the audience, and he's like, like, what do you do? And the guy said he designs pools. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, just you dig an oval, that's a pool, like, what do you mean you design pools? And he's like, well, I went to school for engineering. And then he goes, and then you ended up with pools? Like, what happened between point A and point B here? And he starts talking to the other people at the table because they're all his friends from college. And then he asked the one guy, he's like, what did you go to school for? And he just goes, because just the timing of it was just perfect. And he just goes, I'm an engineer. And the room just erupts because it's like this kid wanted to be an engineer, but now he's designing pools. None of his friends are engineers, but this one guy succeeded. He became the engineer of the group. And Stavros was just dying on stage, like laughing. And then he's just kind of like, are you really an engineer? And the guy's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he just goes, this feels like a Santa Claus moment for me where I want to believe. So I'm not going to ask any more questions because I want to just leave that answer right there. Because I don't care if you're not an engineer. The timing was perfect. It was beautiful. We're moving on to the next subject. It's just
Oh my
stuff like
God.
that. It's just crowd work. Crowd work is so funny because like it's the most legitimate form of the comedian. It's like, because my materials are me, my jokes are me, but they're prepared, they're thought out, they're designed. But like if I just ask you a question and my answer is my answer, that's 100% just me speaking.
This is something I've always wondered about comedians as well. Because like I know that a lot of it can be like constructed in the sense that it's not real. Maybe it's like someone, I don't know, talking shit about their wife, but they don't actually really mean it. But they just
Yeah.
make stuff up, or But then sometimes you get people that are like, "No, this could actually be true." I think they're just like angry at life, so they just make it into comedy.
That happened. We're all pretty angry. No, every I will say for me and for most of my friends or all of my friends, every joke we write has truth in it. It may be a semi embellished version, but the base of the joke is true. Like I have a joke where I talk about how I eat Captain Crunch. Do you have Captain Crunch in the UK?
Captain Crunch. I think I've heard
Like
of
the
it. Yeah,
sugary cereal.
everything's sugary here, but yeah, yeah, we don't. I think we might. We might maybe.
So it's basically just a super sugary
Yeah.
child cereal. And the joke about that I have the
So
joke,
it's a child cereals.
it's for kids. No one over 10 should be eating it, but
No one should eat it. It's just a bowl of sugar. I don't understand. Sorry,
I
go
eat
off on
it
a
every day.
tangent here, but just cereals do nothing for you unless it's bran flakes. It's just you see you just eat a bowl of sugar. To be honest,
I know it really is bad. But that's the joke that I have about it is that I say like, "Hi, my name is Max. I'm 27 years old. My hairline's entering its early 40s. I'm at the stage of my life where the cashier at the grocery store is questioning if the food I'm buying is for me or for a child. You know, is this guy really going to eat 4 boxes of Captain Crunch this week?
fuck yeah.
Yeah." And then I talk about how like I've been eating Captain Crunch every day since I was a kid. I currently have prescription toothpaste because my teeth are so bad. And
Is that true?
100%. It costs $25 a month. It's insane. And that's the thing is like when I say it, you're like, there's no way this guy actually eats sugary kid cereal every day. And then I was out with some friends and we were talking about breakfast and I was like, yeah, I had like Cocoa Puffs. And they were just like, are you serious? They were like, wait, that's a true joke? Like everything. I was like, 100%. Like that's what I do.
It's weird because you realize when you're growing up that it doesn't actually give you anything.
Nothing.
Yeah, and for a while, I don't know when I started drinking coffee, maybe college age, I don't know, but like I remember like not eating breakfast, because I'm a widow, I don't eat breakfast. I eat big lunch. That's how I. But anyway, anytime I would eat breakfast, toast kind of helped, I guess. But like, yeah, anytime it was a bowl of cereal, nothing, just
Yeah.
nothing,
No.
nothing at all.
It's just a time filler.
I mean, it's pretty boss to eat it at night time for some reason. I don't know. I like doing
That's
that.
the thing. Coming home 2 in the morning, a
Mm.
nice bowl of sugary cereal.
It's also the least amount of effort possible as well. You just
Exactly.
bowl, crap, milk, spoon, done.
Done. Exactly. That's why I do it. That's why I do it every day.
Fuck
It's so
yeah, I
bad.
love cereal, man. I love cereal, especially that granola shit. Like
Yeah.
that stuff is like, I don't know, if there was an equivalent of like hard drugs that were legal for like middle class people, that's what it would be. It's just
Granola cereal.
yeah, man. Just
Hey man, you got any of that cashy? You got that special K, brother?
Give me some
You
of that
got,
granola, brother.
you got 20 quid worth? Let's go.
I know you got it. Don't lie to me.
Yeah. I saw that box. I see that Kellogg's behind you.
Kellogg's is, oh my god, Kellogg's is, no, not Kellogg's. Crunchy nut. Do you have crunchy nut cornflakes in the
I think
US?
so. I think we might call it something else.
In it, that stuff is the most addictive stuff I've ever had in my life. Like it's, I don't know what they put in it. Probably crack,
Sugar.
but it's so good. Well, yeah, obviously it's sugar. But it's so good. It's
Yeah.
and then I don't know. Like I remember watching going on a deep dive into cereals, because some YouTuber that I like that does videos on it where he just exposes like how bad everything that you love is. And he did one on cereals, and I already knew that they were bad for you, but like I didn't know that like a lot of them, the ones like Special K or whatever, where they try to say like, oh yeah, you eat it as part of a special diet, and
Right.
it's like the point with that is that like the only thing that's actually healthy about the diet having that cereal is everything else that you eat aside from the cereal.
Exactly.
There's like,
Show the picture of the cereal, some fruit, orange juice, tea, water, and
but
all that. It's
literally,
like,
you could say that about anything. You could say that about
yeah,
something unhealthy, like, oh, you could eat 15 candy bars a day as part of a healthy diet.
right. As
And
long
then
as you're eating all of this stuff over here.
yeah, it's like, but you just conveniently leave that out. Like it's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's cereal that's helping you lose weight and stay trim.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's
We
definitely
would we
not
wouldn't we wouldn't lie to you. Never.
No, no. It's definitely not the rest of your awesome diet. It's the special K.
It should be illegal, man. Like it really should be. I'm sorry, I don't know how long this cereal tangent will go on for, but yeah. But I just it's just so much in it. It's so bad. And I think the thing that's worse about it is that it is marketed to kids. That's the dodgy thing about it, you know. And I remember growing up with that, and yeah, obviously like they plaster a bunch of stuff over the boxes to make it more appealing to kids and stuff, and you have it, and it's great. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't give you anything. It literally doesn't. It's just a bowl of sugar, and
yeah,
yeah.
no. And I'm a prime example of it working into adulthood.
See, I never get qualms about that.
There's no reason that I need to eat Cocoa Puffs or Reese's Puffs or anything every day, but I do it, and it tastes good.
I love doing stuff like that, like going into McDonald's and ordering like a child's meal, and like
Exactly.
they look at you funny, and it's like, look at me all you want, motherfucker. I don't care.
I want that toy.
Yeah, I want that toy, man. It's a good fucking toy.
I don't want a burger. I want 4 chicken nuggets. That's exactly the amount of food that I want right now.
Oh my god, those chicken nuggets, man.
Those are rough. Chicken nuggets are rough.
I remember there was some kid that I knew when I was growing up who would just like purposefully spend a good 10 minutes like ripping all of the what are the skin, yeah, off the chicken nuggets before he'd eventually eat.
Is he okay?
No.
Is he okay now? Do we know where he is?
I don't know, but he probably grew up to be a serial killer.
Yeah, that's not a normal. Like I get cutting the crust off the sandwiches, but that's different.
I think the skin is the worst part.
Did he put the skin somewhere else, or did he eat it eventually?
No, he just didn't eat it. That's the best
weird.
part. That is literally the best part.
That's
what's wrong with you?
Part of the chicken nugget is the skin. Oh,
fuck me.
Weird. He's not okay. He's somewhere right now.
He's probably just sitting in KFC, staring into the abyss.
Skinning chicken. Oh, Randy's here again. He's doing the thing in the corner.
He's skinning the chickens again.
He's skinning the chickens. Okay, we'll just leave you be there. Okay.
You okay, sir? Leave me alone.
Leave me alone.
I'm skinning the chicken.
This is my me time.
This is what I do. This is what I do for fun.
This is what I do. Sunday afternoon.
What are you doing at the weekend, John? I'm skinning chickens and KFC.
Skinning chickens. What are you doing? I'm not talking to you again. That's for sure.
What is good comedy in your opinion?
Something.
Skinning chickens.
Skinning chickens.
That's the comedy.
Just anything. I mean, like anything that's funny, anything that makes me laugh. Well, it's such a dumb answer,
really?
But it's like,
yeah,
I've seen so much comedy that even if it's just a dumb little one-liner and it makes me laugh, great. If you're like, I don't know, yeah, anything funny. Like Mitch Hedberg, he's an amazing comedian. He's passed away, but he's an amazing comedian. He had a joke about donut receipts. He's like, the joke is basically like, why do I need a receipt for this donut? I'm never gonna need to prove that I ate a donut. And it's like, that's so dumb.
well,
but
because
it's
you can
funny.
just be like, look at my stomach, like.
Exactly. Did you have this donut?
Here's the proof right here.
Right here. Here's the receipt. Like, you're never gonna do that. And it's just such a dumb little idea, but it's so funny.
Are comedians self-employed?
I think technically, yeah. A lot of people, there's in the States, because we have amazing taxes. There's fun little things.
Shout out to the IRS. What's up, guys? HM Revenue Customs, I'm looking at you.
Yeah. I'm
taking my money.
You register yourself as a business, and then you register a business and you employ yourself through the business. I think that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah,
and then also like
do that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And then also, but I think it helps like for if the comedian gets into like screenwriting or gets into putting like producing
Mm.
other projects. I think the business helps with that for like in terms of moving money around to allocate it and things like that. But yeah, I think we're all set. I think everybody's self-employed
What
in
are
the grand
your
scheme of it.
So what are your goals in comedy? What are you trying to do? Like, is it you trying to get like a Netflix special, or you battling for Dave Chappelle's position, or you want to? What are you trying to do?
Um,
State your
I
intentions.
uh,
Who
I
goes
think
here?
what do you want to do? Pay rent. No.
Hey, dude, if that's the goal, I understand, man. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm pulling bar shifts at the moment, doing everything just to make the money roll in,
I,
but it's
I
not
think
rolling
that's
in.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it's good to have those goals. I definitely have the goal of wanting to put out and be known, like be, have specials, have all that. So like in terms of a career, I'd like to be a working comedian. I'd like to be able to support myself while doing comedy. If that, I mean, like doing stand up or doing writing gigs or doing anything comedy related. I'm a stand up first. I'm going to do the other stuff also, but any capacity of being involved with comedy is what I would like to have as my career. Um, but then also like I have goals in terms of just the jokes that I'm doing. I kind of like when I set out, I wanted to have at least a half hour of new material every year to start because I'm not doing that many shows, so it is hard to write like a full. Because I day one I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have an hour by the end of the year, and then I actually learned how hard it is to write an hour when you're not because comedians work in increments of 5 minutes.
Mm.
You write 5 minutes of jokes, 5 minutes of jokes, 5 minutes of jokes, and then you also have to whittle down those 5 minutes of jokes to be good 5 minutes of jokes. So you have to dedicate a lot of time to get 5 minutes of material. So just starting out, if I'm not touring, I'm not doing, club shows every weekend, 30 minutes is a pretty realistic number. And then once I get, on the road more, I start doing more shows, doing more time, it becomes a bit easier to write the bigger, the length of your sets because you're just doing more comedy more times a week. So you have more chances to write.
What would you say are the most challenging aspects of being a comedian and comedy?
Um, the most challenging aspects, just the doing it because it's so brutal. It's a very brutal industry because it's similar to being a musician. There's a lot of years where you're not doing anything.
Mm.
You know, you're grinding, you're working really hard. Probably similar to being an actor as well. Like there's a lot of time spent to get to that one thing, and not many people know about that time that you're working. And then all of a sudden from that point, everybody's aware of what you're doing, but to get to this point is so much stuff.
Right, like
And it's
whenever
so yeah,
go on, please.
it's so easy to get deterred by it because it's like you're doing 5 nights a week to rooms of 3 people, and it's like, oh, is this really a viable idea? And the big answer is no, but the fun answer is yes. And it's just like just not quitting, just keeping it, keeping, and hopefully it all works out at some point.
You say, yeah, man. You say exactly how I feel. Like I feel this way all the time with acting, my podcast, my content creating online, you name it.
Mhm.
And it's just like sometimes I like to like if I'm feeling more positive about things, I like to sit down and imagine that like these are the stories I'll tell one day sitting on a talk show and be like, yes, there was a time when I was doing this, and this, and then I
Yeah.
became a star and but I lived a normal life and it was hard and these were my struggles. Yeah, I like to like imagine that sometimes so I don't feel quite so pathetic and failure. No, just like to imagine, like, or like being on the on the Oscar podium and be like, I'd like to thank me, myself, and me,
because no one else had me on.
because I did it all myself, motherfucker. No, yeah, I mean, it's you got to keep going, you got to keep trying, and that's how you get better, isn't it? You know, I mean, when it comes to the podcast, I thought by now, it's been 2 years, I thought I'd be like sponsored, I'd have like millions of followers. Well, I didn't think that. I thought I'd at least have like maybe a couple of hundred people listening. And the reality is it hasn't gone that way. But there have been positives that have happened as well. Like I get to talk to amazing people from around the world, such as yourself, and learn about things that I know nothing about. Like I have a very superficial knowledge of comedy, but by talking to yourself, I can learn a lot more about it from your personal lens. And one thing that I really like doing with this show is kind of not only exploring a person's life, but kind of gaining knowledge and insight from that person and then sharing that with the world, you know, in the form of content. And that's something I really love about that. But it's what I found with acting, which I guess maybe is similar to comedy, is, as you say, you don't always get work. Sometimes you get a lot of work, sometimes you get nothing. And that makes me personally appreciate it a lot more. One thing I can relate to you on with regards to just the numbers wise is I do regular live streams on TikTok, and sometimes it makes me laugh because I generally get about 5 people if I'm lucky, maybe. Sometimes it's more, sometimes less. What happens actually, which is quite funny, is that there's a lot of people following me that regularly check in, but they don't all check in at the same time because busy, they got lives, whatever, right? And I love them all. They're all wonderful, awesome people. But they're not always around. And sometimes I'll just check in and there'll be no one there, or there'll be like 2 people there. And like sometimes someone will come in and be like, dude, you're really good. Why don't you have more people here? And I'm like, I don't know.
Good question.
I don't know. You tell me, man. What am I doing wrong? It's just same with the podcast. I've had people say that, like, oh, this show's doing really well. I love what you're doing. And I'm like, thank you.
It's like, good. Tell your friends. Tell other people. Let's go. Come on.
Do you know one thing I've actually started doing? I don't know if you do this, but like, I used to have a rule that I'm still I go back and forth on this. Generally speaking, I won't tell people in real life about everything that I'm doing because I don't want to be like that guy that's like, oh, hey, come check me out. Check out everything I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, it's like, you got to promote yourself.
Exactly.
And so now every once in a while, I try to do that and I feel awkward about it. I'm still not quite okay with it, but I've started doing it a bit more. Like, do you do that? Do you tell people in real life, like, hey, I'm a comedian, come see a show sometime?
No. So
that's lame, man.
No. I do that, but from what if it's somebody, like if it's within my friend group or my acquaintances, I'll for sure tell them, like if I have a show coming up and stuff like that. But there's been moments like when I was down in Austin, I was in Austin, Texas for about a week just doing stuff for comedy, and almost every Uber I got into, I'm a huge fan, and you can tell me that this is American and mean and everything, but I'm a huge fan of not talking in an Uber. If the driver does not talk to me, they get 5 stars and a great tip. If they talk to me, I immediately hate them. I don't know what it is about me. I think like just being like the New York taxi, every New York yellow cab I ever took, they never talked to me, and I took those a lot before I got into Ubers. So that's what I was used to and what I became accustomed to. And then Uber came out and it's like, oh, you're driving with a friend. Like, no, hush up, get me to the destination. I don't want to talk to you.
What's your worst having to listen to an Uber driver story?
Well, it's and this is the thing. It's every time I get into an Uber and they talk to me, they say, what do you do? And it's like, okay, I can either tell them about my day job that's currently paying the bills, but they're not going to, then that's going to open up more lines of questions. Or I can tell them I'm a comic, and that could go one of 2 ways. They say cool, or they say tell me a joke.
Yeah.
And it's almost always tell me a joke, and I hate it because
do you ever just purposefully tell a shit joke?
I do. I tell
And then just like, well, that's not very funny. You're
I
obviously not a
tell
very good comedian.
and then it's like, well, that could have been a fan. Um, no, I tell
Just tell the joke, it goes badly, and you're like, oh, tough crowd.
yeah, exactly. Start crowd work. I'm like, what do? Oh, you drive Uber. Okay.
Oh god, yeah, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just tell like I tell super G-rated like kids jokes from the summer camp that I used to work at. And they're usually like, "Do you tell that on stage?" It's like, clearly no, my guy. But the jokes that I tell on stage aren't gonna work out of context here. Like,
Oh my god. What's a super uber G-rated joke? You've sparked my curiosity.
yeah. What do you call an alligator in a vest?
I don't know. What do you call an alligator in a vest?
An investigator. What do you call an alligator that's also a detective?
I don't know. What do you call an alligator that's also a detective?
An investigator. What do you call an alligator who participates in the stock
Fucking
market?
alligator jokes, man. Why are you so obsessed with
Hold
alligators?
on. What do you call an alligator that participates in the stock market?
I don't know what.
A good businessman. Just kidding. Investigator. And that's usually the reaction that I get from that joke. It's just like, okay.
just say, get out.
Yeah, it's like, all right, you know what,
can walk.
the ride's over. We're all done here.
No, to be fair, I feel with you on that one. I've seen that happen. I've heard that happen so many times. Tell us your best joke. I mean, fuck, I've had that. Because I don't consider myself a comedian or funny at all. But I've sometimes stated that I do comedic stuff online, like TikToks or videos or whatever.
Right.
But I'm not necessarily like, yeah, because you get people say like, oh, is this supposed to be funny? And it's like, well, maybe some people find it funny, maybe not. It's all subjective. Most of the time I
Yeah.
just do it because it makes me laugh.
Exactly. That's like at the end
like,
of the day, I'm laughing at my jokes.
yeah.
And that's
I am so funny. That's it, yeah. To me.
But that's I think Jimmy Carr talks about it in one of his, or Jimmy Carr, Ricky Gervais, one of the two of them talk about it in their specials, where comedy is, I think it was Jimmy Carr, Solid Gold Greatest Hits, that special. He talks because Jimmy Carr, he opens up the room to heckling for like a couple minutes just to get it over with. And somebody said, when do the jokes start? And he's like, that's the important thing is like, when do the jokes start? Because for some of the people, the jokes have been this entire time. But if you didn't like those jokes, then the jokes haven't started yet. And that's the thing. It's like comedy is so subjective that like, you might find it funny and he might not, but he might find it funny and you might not. And that's fine. Somewhere in there, the jokes are still funny. And it just kind of, you got to find what you find funny, which probably isn't in the back of an Uber. So that's all you Uber drivers listening. Shh. Let me ride in peace.
I agree with that too. I don't. It depends what mood I'm in, but sometimes I don't want to talk, and then they start talking to me, and I'm like, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, really? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in New York the other week, and it was last week because the Queen died. It was the day the Queen died. I was in New York. And I was in an Uber from.
Shouldn't have laughed then, but it's just like,
Yeah.
It's lol.
Well, it was like
just kidding. Calm down.
It was a weird situation because like I got on the plane, the Queen was alive, and I got off the plane, and suddenly the Queen was dead, and I was like, I guess I think I missed something there.
I was working in a bar. It was really weird. So there was this football match on.
Yeah.
That was on later in the day, and there was loads of Spanish fans. So the bar was smashed, and I was just kind of like, ah! And then everyone left, and we were tidying up. And then this guy, older gentleman, came over to the bar and just looked at, because there's like a TV behind us on the wall.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, and I was like, what? I said, can't be true. And then look at the TV, and then Queen has died. I was like, wow. And I wasn't like sad or anything like that. I'm not like. I mean, I'm sad in the sense that, like, it's like, oh, that's unfortunate, that's whatever. I'm not particularly a big fan of the monarchy or anything, but I was just like, oh. But the bigger thing that I felt was it was kind of weird, like surreal. a bit like I'm not by any means comparing it, but a bit like the same feeling of like when 9/11 happened or something.
Yeah.
You remember where you were, or you remember the feeling, and like it was just odd. It was like, oh, okay, that's weird.
Yeah. I think that's like from what a lot of the Americans,
Mm,
because a lot of Americans follow the monarchy
sure.
like they follow the Kardashians. Like it's just kind of like
Which I
that
don't get that.
situation.
I do not. I don't understand because people ask me all the time. Like I got a bunch of messages from people like, "Oh, my condolences," and I was just like, "I'm not related to them."
That's not my grandmother.
No, no, like
Uh,
it's sad. Don't get me wrong. Like, but I, without sounding
yeah.
harsh, like it doesn't affect my life. Like,
Well, and that's I think that's the thing was like people in America. Yeah, it's a very similar. Yeah, it is that surreal moment of like, oh, because it's one of those things that you don't think about. You don't think about the
yeah,
queen dying, and the thing, what she was what the queen for 75 years or something like
yeah,
that,
long
70
time,
years.
yeah. It's odd, very
Like
odd.
there's people that were born and died with only her as the queen.
Mm. I think that the weirdest thing for me is like how now there's going to be a king, and he's
Yeah,
King Charles III as well, which is kind of weird. Um, and like everything changes. The
yeah,
money changes, stamps change, iconography changes. I saw something the other day that said that like anything that has the royal seal, because we had this thing in the UK, it's kind of weird, where certain products, particularly ones that have been around for a long time, so like Heinz, who make
yeah.
ketchup and beans or whatever,
I saw that. I saw that.
they have to change the royal seal that they have, which I never really got that. I feel like it's kind of like a stamp of approval. Like, yes, it's like beans endorsed by the
Boom,
Queen. You know,
British.
uh, kind of a little bit. It's almost like yeah. It's like, but I think it also means that they're supplied to the royal family in some instances as well. I know that that's the
Um,
case with um maybe Tate Lyle and Waitrose, the supermarket here in the UK. Um, I think there's something to that, but yeah, just it's going to be weird how everything's going to change. Also, there's a lot of people talking about how it might affect politics because little known fact, there are still some powers that the monarchy actually has in relation to politics. So, for example, the monarchy has the ability to like start and stop parliament, and for instance if a particular parliament is regarded as like corrupt or unfit for office, the king or queen can actually interject in that situation and
oh,
force
okay.
them to form a new government, which I was like,
Yeah.
ooh. And also any major law that's passed has to be signed off by the king or queen.
Yeah. See, that's like my parents, because I lived in Spain and I had British friends. So to my parents, I'm the leading authority on anything Europe.
Oh
And they're
really?
like, so like, what does the monarchy do? And I was like, I don't know.
I don't care.
About the Spanish king, but I cannot tell you about those guys. Yeah. It was like, but the Uber driver was, we got in the car and he's like, did you see the queen died? And I was like, oh, that's a trip we're gonna have. Okay. And then it was a 15-minute trip, thankfully. And
Talking
he just
about
talked about the monarchy the whole time. And I was like, yeah, it's a crazy thing, I guess. I don't know. And I was like, why do you know so much
I,
about
f- I
this?
feel like I feel like in a way it's kind of weirder for two Americans to be talking about it. Not nothing against that or anything. It's
No,
just odd.
I think it was
I don't
just,
know.
it's one of those things where like it was either, okay, we could talk about nothing, we could talk about where I'm from, or we could talk about the hot topic of the news today. And I think that was the hottest topic because
Yeah.
he had on like the CNN live stream, and like so he would just been listening to it the entire day, and I was just like, yeah, let's dive into this one. Here we go.
To be fair, I'm guilty of that. I remember when the Amber Heard trial was on. I just had that shit on every single day because it was just meme central.
And then I've learned more about the royal family in the last week than I had in my entire life. And
Dude,
it is interesting. There are interesting aspects to it, but I'm from the USA. They don't
born in the
we told them to
USA.
get out 200 years ago.
200 years ago, we fought the British and we
Our
won.
guns, God, and glory. Yeah.
It is kind of weird, isn't it? Like I remember when I was a kid, there was an Air Force base across the road from where we lived. It was awesome because when I grew up in the 90s to early 2000s, and we didn't really have Halloween here. It wasn't a
Right.
thing, but obviously it was big in the States. And so the Americans kind of just like introduced us to that, and it was awesome. Obviously, as a kid, like, hey, free sweets, get to dress up as like a ghost or whatever. It's fun. Um, and also, I remember that they would celebrate the 4th of July in this like park that was right next to where the base was.
Oh yeah.
And it was brilliant. Like I got to try like corn dogs for the first time. Disgusting. I got to yeah. I've got another thing about that in a second as well. Actually, I'll just tell it now. I remember going to a wrestling show. I think it was like SmackDown in like 2005 or
Yeah.
whatever in London, and I remember queuing up outside, and there was just the deathly stench of corn dogs. It was. I was like, "What is that?" And someone said, "Oh, it's corn dogs," and I was like, like I actually felt like throwing up. It was just so much. I don't know, hydrogenated fats,
What do
whatever.
you mean? You don't like a pancake wrapped around a hot dog?
Bro,
That's an
I
ideal
like
food.
pancakes. I don't like corn dogs. That's just sickly.
Oh, they're nice. If they're cooked right, they're good.
Oh
And what's there's that's basically a sausage roll, isn't it? Like from the
no,
breads?
no, because
Oh,
sausage roll is amazing. Corn dog is disgusting. I will die
that's
on this
fair.
hill. I don't care because I love
Well,
American
that's the
food.
episode. No.
That's
Uh,
damn it.
but
I'm
then
right and you're wrong, and that's it.
you're also from the beans and toast part of the world, so I don't know if that's the leading authority on food critics.
But anyway, what was I saying? So yeah, they would do the 4th of July celebrations, and you know, I was just like, yay, celebrate, right? Fireworks and all that. And then as I got older, I kind of realized how weird it is for Americans to celebrate 4th of July in the UK, which was like the whole point of it is you celebrate independence from the UK.
Yeah.
But then I don't know, it's changed, isn't it? Like it's ancient history. But it's weird. And the relationship our nations have is odd. Like I remember joking about it during the Blair and Bush years about how they would call it the special relationship, and it almost
Yeah.
sounded like a bit of an underhanded, like homosexual relationship between
Right.
Blair and Bush. It's like, oh yes, the way I always saw it was that America's like, imagine, you know, you're in the playground, right? I think I saw some comedians say this as well, where it's like America's like, I'm gonna kick your ass, and then Britain is behind going, yeah. we're just
Right.
we're just the guy that goes, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. Well, that was in that time. All all the documentaries, everything I've read about the time is very much like America wasn't afraid to be the bad guy, but
Right.
the UK was really cool with putting America as the bad guy and just kind of hanging out at the back.
Well, because we're the bad guys too. We try to present
Yeah.
ourselves as the good guys, but no. If you go back and look into British history, we are definitely not the good guys.
No.
Just saying that, just so you know.
Definitely not.
I try not to think about. I try to just live in the now and be like, do you know what? I'm just
Exactly.
going to be a good person and try and do that. Like, not try and
Yeah.
focus on the horrid history.
Right.
But then again, every country has this, a good and a bad side. It's like you just have to try not to focus on the bad stuff as much as you
Yeah.
can. But it's kind of horrifying.
Right.
Like I remember going to Ireland, for example, and learning about how much they hate Churchill.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like thrown by that. And then I read into it and I learned about it. I was like, oh, okay. And there was just like stuff I didn't know. Like, and again, this is alleged. I don't know if this actually happened, but there's a story that goes around that says that he had some involvement with fighting the IRA, and it led to, unfortunately, like some people, like innocent bystanders being killed. And I was like, I never knew about this. But of course, you wouldn't be taught about it in
In the
England.
UK. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's just interesting, you know.
Well, that was the first time I went to Europe. I did, I think probably 2 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And like I went Dublin, Galway, Cork, Belfast, and it was just like Dublin, being a major city, it's pretty mixed in terms of political views and things like that. But then going to Galway was like, oh, this is like Galway and Cork are like, oh, this is actually the real part of Irish politics. Like this is how they feel. And then getting up to Belfast and just seeing the juxtaposition between the two different ideas of like who was in the right, who was in the wrong, and then doing in Belfast they have the Black Cab tours, which give you a tour of everywhere the troubles were happening, and like they go to the Peace Wall and things like that. And it was cool to hear that side. But then a friend of my uncle's is from Belfast, and he took me on a tour up to the Giant's Causeway and things like that. But I asked him, I was like, "You're from here, you grew up in this. What do you think about it?" And he grew up in northern Belfast, so I think that's the Protestant side. I could be wrong. But he grew up in the not Catholic side of the city. And talking about that was very interesting to hear, because like they were talking about the same story from two different
Sure.
sides, you know? And then even going to the museums in Belfast, and like the museums on the northern side of the city said this stuff, and the museums on the southern side of the city said the same thing, but just they flipped around who was at fault. And it's like, we don't really have that in America too much. I think we do like with the Civil War, but not to the same extent of like such dramatic differences between who's right, who's wrong, or why it happened, why it didn't happen this way, things like that.
I don't know. I mean, your political situation is interesting because, like, here in the UK, we have similar, but like, for instance, conservatives are the UK equivalent of the Republicans, but
Yeah.
very very different. Like, I think even Trump, when he was in office, stated that sort of mockingly about the conservatives. He said, "Oh, they're too liberal," and he's right. Technically, he's right. By comparison, they are very much so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for like in the today sense, we do, but I mean
Yeah.
like in the historical sense, like we don't have
Okay.
a city with a wall running through it,
Okay.
because of things that happened. Like, yeah, 100%. The Republicans and the Democrats in this country are absolutely absurd. And it's like, come on, guys.
You get them everywhere, though. We have it here in the UK. We had a party called UKIP, who were
Yeah.
basically ex-Tories that were
Yeah.
not happy. So then they made their own little party. I'm not going to go into details about it. You can look it up online, but
You can Google it.
it's interesting.
Vice did a really, I think Jamali Maddox, the UK comedian, he had a show on Vice called Hate Thy Neighbor, and they did stuff with UKIP, and it's really interesting. But that's also like in terms of speaking of politics and tying it a little bit to comedy, it's a weird thing to do, because you don't want to be labeled as one side. You want to be able to talk about both sides. But
You say that, but then like, well, I suppose it's a bit different. I was going to give the example of like late night TV show hosts who are also comedians sometimes, and
yeah,
they'll often pick a side and then just spend like their opening monologue, just like part of it, just bashing a particular party or whatever. And it's, I don't like. I've heard a lot of people speak about that and say that like they would rather that wouldn't exist in a show like that, and I tend to agree. Like, I think those sorts of shows should ideally be free from politics, because it feels very like, I don't know, like it's like telling people off. It's like very like, and it's like it's supposed to be
yeah,
like a light-hearted talk show, and then there's and also it'll go from like a rant about, let's say, like Trump or Biden or whatever, and then it will go into like some skit they did that's like supposed to be fun, and it's like unrelated to that. It would be totally different,
yeah,
and it's just like, this is a weird juxtaposition. It's just like, what the fuck? This is the
yeah.
same show. Like, I don't know.
I think the Trump years of America
Good time for
really,
comedy.
like, it was a great time for comedy, but also for like the shows, for like the Daily Show, and like Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and Real Time with Bill Maher. Those shows, I think, really started to pick a side during the Trump years,
Yeah.
because the stuff Trump was doing was so outlandish that if you even sided with him a little bit, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was media death if you were just like, yeah, you know what, he had a good point there. Like, you didn't want to do that at all. So I think prior to Trump, like the Daily Show, when Jon Stewart, I mean, Trevor Noah is an excellent host of the Daily Show, but I think prior to Trump, those shows did a bit better at flipping between the different sides and like talking about it. But I think just good old Donnie came in and made everything just such like cut and dry, you have to be this or you have to be this situation.
How do you feel
But
about bringing politics into comedy, like your personal belief? Do you try and do it sometimes?
I do. It's you have to be very delicate because you don't know, like, so for example, like I have a joke about the vaccine.
Okay.
And I have a lot of degrees. I have 2 degrees. I have 2 degrees in science. I'm a scientific person. So like the vaccine, the entire time, like vaccines in general make sense to me just because I've been exposed to science for so long that like, vaccines, they just, I understand the concept, I understand the process and all that. But I also know that like the literacy rate in the US is not very high. It's a fourth grade. The average reading level in the US is a US fourth grade reading level. So there's a lot of people who just don't have access to the education that I did, which plays into why people don't or say they don't like because they don't understand different scientific things that are happening, right? So you have to really be, there's a lot, if you're going to talk about politics in your set, you have to do a lot of background research
Mm,
prior, because you can just, there's some people you could just go out and start making fun of them, but that's not really fun for anybody.
yeah.
If you're making a joke to make a joke and it's really well written and well executed, then those people will also laugh. Because like Buffalo, New York, it's a city of about 300,000 people, and historically the city votes Democrat. Just outside the city, for the majority of New York State, votes Republican. So there's, because New York's a really weird state in general, because New York City is the biggest city in the state and it's 9 million people. And then the next biggest is Buffalo at 300,000,
So
so
weird.
it's insane. And so like all the cities in New York vote blue, vote Democrat. Everywhere else, if you look at like a voting map of New York, every other part of the state is red. They vote Republican. So you have this weird mix of the city people voting liberal and everyone else voting conservative. So in your audience, you have that mix too. And
Give it.
you don't
Sorry.
want to lean too much to one side, because then you're alienating a percentage of the audience.
I feel like as well, in the States, it's a lot more divisive. Like, it's not to say that we're not divisive here in politics, because we absolutely are, but
You guys are more
it,
polite about it.
yeah, I don't know. It's somehow, I don't know. Like in the States, it's like the sort of thing that people almost are willing to throw hands over sometimes. And I
Exactly.
worry, like, if you're a comedian doing a show and you offend someone, like, that could be a potentially dangerous moment, like, for you, depending on what's been said and how it's done and
Yeah.
stuff.
So I mean, so far that,
You,
yeah,
you just duck.
just um the thing is, I think, or I hope, the people, and this is, I think, I mean, a lot of big comedians talk about this. Like, you came to a comedy show, you had
Mm.
a ha ha show. Everything I'm saying on stage is obviously a joke.
Speaking of which, what do you? I know it's old news at this point, but it's good to get a comedian's opinion on this. What did you make of the Chris Rock Will Smith slap incident from the perspective of like what it means as a comedian?
I
And
thought of
it's
jokes immediately. Um,
for
no,
sure,
it's
but
it's one
like,
of those things where it's like, I think that was such an outlier situation. You know, the Chris Rock is an award-winning comedian. Everything he says is a joke on stage. Off stage, sure. If he was making fun of Jada off stage, that's one thing. But he was doing it on stage. Now, that being said, it is very much like what I was saying before, like finding that line and then crossing that line. Chris unfortunately found that line on a very public day. And that's the thing. It's like when you find that line, you have to deal with the repercussions. I don't think Will should have slapped him. I think Will should have just said something. Like, when he was like, "Oh, keep my wife's name." I think that could have been the end of it. I don't think he needed to hit him. I don't know why he hit him, but it's one of those things where it's like, as a comedian, that's what you do. And like, I think Chris might have rethought how he's doing some jokes for the future, like, because, and also the thing is, like, Jada, from what I know, Jada was very hush hush about the entire alopecia situation. I think I could be completely wrong, but
I think that
I
might be
didn't know
wrong.
about
Yeah,
it.
I think she might have. Well, here's the thing as well. Like, obviously, no one wants to be made of fun of, like, for having like a medical condition. So it just
Yeah,
sucks, you know. Um, I'll be honest. I didn't notice. I thought she just decided to shave her head and was just looking badass. Because the thing is, a lot of women do that just because they want the style, and it
yeah.
just looks normal, and you don't even think anything of it. But I think in that particular time frame, she had spoken about it, maybe on like her podcast or something,
Oh, okay.
and so it was out. Like, in was Chris Rock in the wrong? Yes, he probably should have done his research and realized that that would be in poor taste. Is he the only comedian that's ever made a joke in poor taste?
No.
No.
And
I
is he
could
gonna be the last?
no.
Hell no.
No, I mean, I think of like Frankie Boyle, if you're familiar with him, a Scottish comedian who back in the day he was known for being like ruthless with his joke telling and would
Yeah.
just take the mick out of anyone and not give
Yeah.
two F's about it.
No.
Now he is criticizing other comedians for doing the same thing that he used to do like 15 odd years ago. And it's hypocritical, but it just makes you think like about how the scene has changed. And like, I feel bad for comedians because it's such a tough time to know how to navigate this. It used to be that you could just joke about anything and that comedy is just comedy.
Yeah.
But now there's all these rules like, well, you can't say this and you can't say this, and you have to be careful about this. And it's like, how do you navigate that? Like,
Well,
how do you personally deal with that?
it's one of those things where um I don't remember, I there was a comedian that said it, that was like, comedy is still comedy, just the words have changed. And if you can't adapt to it, then you're not a good comedian. Because you can
Okay.
still make jokes about what you were making jokes about before.
Mm.
You just have to change the language that you were using. The topics
Okay.
themselves aren't unable to be joked about. Just the way you describe it is
Okay.
how you can joke about it.
Okay. To play devil's advocate to what you're saying right now, because I partially disagree with you on this.
Sure.
If it were just certain, like refraining from using certain words, then I'd agree with you. But like in the instance of something like Dave Chappelle, for example, he made jokes about a friend of his, and that then angered the trans community,
Yeah.
and it caused a full uproar. And there's, I still don't know where I sit on that situation because he was joking about a friend, and some bad came of that as a result of that, and then it caused an uproar and everything, and it causes everyone to reevaluate. But like the point is, that particular community tried to cancel him for that,
Yeah.
and Netflix made the decision to stand by him, and it's a bit of a nicky situation, but it makes you wonder, like, so you can't tell jokes about that? Is that what
When
it
that's
is?
the thing, is like, also I think the one of the funniest parts of that Dave Chappelle situation was that when the backlash came out about what he said, one of the top Netflix people came out and did a press conference
Sure.
and was like, "Yeah, Dave can say all this stuff. It's just like me saying," and then he just said a racial slur on live TV. And then Netflix was, "Why did
Oh,
you do that, you idiot?"
oh my
And they
god.
had to let him go. It's like those are two different situations, you ding dong. This is
Did he,
your
what did he
job,
drop?
your
Did he drop like
livelihood.
the N bomb or something?
He said something real bad, and
Damn.
all the reporters were like, we are recording, sir." And it was just
That
one
is
of those
funny.
moments. It was like, okay, dummy, we gotta fire you now.
It
Like
reminds me
we
of some
can't.
sketch I saw years ago in Britain where there's like a police officer continually having to apologize to different communities for being like insensitive.
Yeah,
And then at the end of it, he's like, that would be like if I would take the mick up. And then he just starts mocking someone else. And then he goes,
yeah.
I'm back here to apologize for my insensitivity.
It's like
Oh,
it's
man.
there. Um, I think like with the Dave Chappelle situation, with every situation where somebody comes out and says that they didn't like it, it is it's a matter of how the joke is executed, I think.
Okay.
Because it's either, and then it's also like, as a comedian, you're going to either defend every joke or you're going to defend no jokes, because there
Yeah.
are going to be comedians that will push that boundary of what's okay to say, what's not okay to say. And like, Dave was talking about a friend of his. So Dave 100% ran those jokes by that person. And that's
Yeah, that's
like
that.
I
See,
write.
that's the thing as well, because in a world where like representation really matters, and you look at things like, okay, let's just take for example what's going on with the Little Mermaid right now.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of wild. There's a lot of people like it makes me to be honest with you, what I'm seeing right now, it happened with Kenobi, it's happening with a lot of series. It's like whenever there seems to be like a black performer in a major role, people just seem really angry about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like that makes me think like, okay, well, I guess there's just a hell of a lot of racist people that have an issue.
Well, and
And
that's the
I
thing.
just
They,
and I don't
yeah.
get that. I mean, I get that. I mean, obviously I don't get racism. Who does? Right? It doesn't make any sense. But like more than that, it's like then you also like bring up the Little Mermaid. Like I saw a video the other day, and it was so beautiful. It was just like loads of like little girls and little boys' reactions to seeing that the lead character is black,
Yeah.
and they're like like really happy and excited about it. And it's just like that's the importance of that. And bringing it back to what we
Exactly.
were talking about before, like even in the like I feel like everything should be taken the mick out of, but not
Yeah.
to mock it like there's something wrong with it, but to mock it so that because I feel like not joking about things is almost like
Worse.
singling. Yeah, it's like singling it out, like oh we can't touch that, and it's like. But then the debate on what you can joke about as well. That's that you could do entire podcasts about that.
Well, that's the thing, and
It's
that's the thing is like, especially with the Little Mermaid, the people who are mad about it, because in reality, it's just another person playing a role. It's a person who got cast for a role.
yeah,
If you're seeing them as anything else, then you're labeling that person.
sure.
It's like it could just be what, I don't know what her name is. It could just be her name, but they're seeing it as a blank actress is now playing Ariel. Instead of just this actress is playing, they're putting something in front of it just to get mad about it. It doesn't have to be. It's like it's the same when the new Annie came out and Jamie Foxx played Mr. Warbucks, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's now blank Annie. It's no longer Annie." Even though it's 100% Annie, just different people playing it,
Oh, okay.
they're putting a label in front of it because they don't like it.
I see what you mean.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. It happens with comedians, it happens with musicians, it happens with actresses and actors and everybody. The people who are mad about it, they're not mad at them making a new, thing. They're mad about something prior to it.
So why can't people just enjoy shit, man? Just
Why can't
relax.
people just
Just chill the fuck out. So there's a black Ariel. Ariel
who
is the
cares? If she does it great, excellent. If the movie's a
yeah.
flop,
That's what I care
it
about.
happens.
Is how well are you? How good are you at playing the role? That's what I care about.
Yeah,
Like I couldn't give two shits if you're white,
right.
black, Asian, whatever. Like just
If you can
play
do
the
it
role.
well, do it. If you can't,
Yeah.
get out.
No, it's like, for instance, I remember here in the UK, there's a series that they did of like a version of like Anne Boleyn or something, and they chose to cast Anne Boleyn as there was a black actress playing it, and it's just like loads of people got annoyed about it because it was historically inaccurate. And it's like, I'm sorry, name me one of those series that is 100% historically
Yeah.
accurate, because basically none of them are. Like,
Or when
it
I
doesn't
remember,
matter. It's just drama. Who
yeah.
cares? It's
Or
fun.
when they put John Boyega in Star Wars, everyone was like,
Oh,
you can't
fuck
have
me.
that. And it's like he's a clone. He could be a clone of somebody. It doesn't matter where it came from.
Yeah,
He's just an actor.
I didn't get. I mean, and he's a great actor as well. But like, people
Yeah,
just focus on someone's fucking skin color. It's like,
exactly. And
Jesus
like it's
Christ.
just and that's the thing. It's like everything I think everything is within the limits of being joked about, but it's the old saying, you punch up, you don't punch down. And like what you were saying, you don't mock the person.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because you
like you
can
kind
have
of. Hmm.
yeah, you have a joke. Like I have jokes that punch up. I have jokes that anything that I do, I make sure it doesn't punch down, because you don't want to make fun of people, but you are trying to tell a story. So you need
Sure.
descriptive factors. You need things in there to provide context to what you're saying. And some of those things happen to be their sexuality, their ethnicity, their food, like anything about them comes into it. And it's not saying like whatever comes after is because of who they are. I'm just giving you the idea of who this person is so that the rest of the story makes sense.
Mm.
I'm providing a setting for the action that happens later. It's not, if somebody makes a joke about me, it's like, oh, the big white guy did this and this and this. Like nothing in the action relates to me being a big white guy. You just need to know that I'm a big white guy because the story needs something. I can't just be like, my friend did that, my friend did this, because that's a boring story, you
Speak,
know?
Speaking of stories, you have a podcast called the Storytime Podcast.
I
What can you tell
do.
us about that?
It's terrible. No.
I appreciate your honesty. Don't
No,
bother watching.
it's a good podcast.
Oh, of
I
course you're going to
host
say
it.
that. No, go on. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
It's I hosted with my friend John. John and I have known each other for a very long time. John is a former touring musician, and so that's where the name Story, it's TOUR for tour, because we're gimmicky like that.
Story.
A lot of people, because I posted stuff about it, my friends were like, "You understand that's spelled incorrectly." I was like, "That is the point." And then I tell them,
I just be like, oh, is it?
yeah, it's like, I thought it
Oh,
was just the British spelling.
whoops.
Tour. Um, yeah, so it's just kind of stories from people who have traveled, people who have been on tour, people who have experienced things on the road. So a lot of the guests so far have been former musicians, former touring musicians. Our one friend Colin was on it, and he, I believe, like went on one or two tours, but his stories were mostly about his time in the Air Force when he was in South Korea. We have some coming up. We have a couple comedians coming up. We have just tour, anything tour related is usually what we end up talking about, just because that's like, I haven't really toured, but I've traveled to do comedy, just been in like places to do it. And then John has spent years, probably 5 6 years on the road touring as a musician. So it's such a weird time to be on the road and working like that, because what people see, like if you go to see a band, you go to see where are you in Manchester, you
I
said?
am, yeah.
Right. All right. So you go to see Arctic Monkeys at the what was I went to a show in Manchester once, and I can't remember the name of the venue. I was gonna try to do a little tie in there.
A AO or whatever the fuck it's called.
It was at like it was at I'll find the ticket. You go to see a band in Manchester, you're only seeing that part of their day. But there's so much that happens between the concerts
Mm.
that people just don't really know about. And it's like, a lot of the guys that we've had on so far toured before they were GPS, before they were smartphones. So it's like, how did you get from Buffalo to Los Angeles?
Yeah.
You know, what happened? And stuff like that.
It reminds me of I really like this guy called Jim Cornette. He does a couple of podcasts. Another wrestling guy. Sorry, guys. And
This is a wrestling podcast now.
yeah, there's a lot of like really interesting road stories that he talks about where like mostly he's talking about the 80s and 90s of him touring the States. Like obviously, yeah, same thing before smartphones, before all of that, and just like how they would get around, how they would move between the territories and stuff. And it's just fascinating learning about that sort of stuff, you know, and also just like how different the world was. Like I often think about that now, like how different the world is today versus how it was when I was growing up. And it's just like, I don't know.
It's such a crazy time. Like one of the guys, the guy that we had on this last week, he talks about one of the tours that he did, and he's like, we had cell phones, but they were flip phones.
Yeah.
And we didn't have GPS. So you would print out the directions. You would have to like count the odometer to make sure you were getting the right amount of miles before you made a turn. And if you messed up, then it was like, all right, let's see what happens here, I guess. Like,
man, internet on flip phones sucked ass.
and you couldn't load.
It took like 10 minutes to load a web page. It was just there's no
Exactly.
point. Like up until the first iPhone was made, there was just no point trying to use internet on phones.
There was nothing. Yeah. By the time the web page loaded, you no longer needed the web page.
Yeah.
I looked it up. It was the Manchester Academy. I saw while she's
There
sleeping
we
at the
go.
Manchester Academy.
Cool, man. Cool. So you've been
That
that's
was
weird.
the first time. It was the first time I had a Greg's vegan sausage roll. And it changed my life.
Vegan. That's how Boris Johnson says it, isn't it? Vegan sausage roll. I love those. I don't know what they put in them in Greg's. For anyone that's stateside and you come to the UK, definitely try Greg's. It's not high quality, it's low quality, but it's cheap. And for some reason, it's just really good. I don't know what they put into those pastries, but
they're so good.
good.
Yeah, because what? They're like 60, 70 pence for like.
Yeah, just.
Oh,
mate, this makes me want a Greg's.
dangerous.
It is. I need to go to the gym after this. Okay. A couple of final questions for you.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
I'll give you two. Because they're both short. I think the first one was what my friend Jake said to me, which was just shut up and do it. Because it's like you're either gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. So just do it. You know, there's no point in like just talking about it, like, oh, I'll do it next time. It's like you're either gonna do it or you're not. So just do it. Or don't, but just do it. And the other one was you know what you're gonna say, you know what you want to say, so just say it. And that came from joke writing. I don't remember who specifically said it to me, but I was talking to them about writing jokes, and because it's like I thought I needed to write a bunch of detail, because there's some comedian like George Carlin famously would write out every word that he would say on stage as if it was a script, but he would deliver it without it sounding like it was a script. But he would write every single word verbatim. Wow. And so I wasn't doing that, but I wasn't just writing premises, like ideas. I was writing like things that I thought would help. And then a friend of mine was just like, okay, this is what you want to talk about. Just go start talking about it and see what happens. You know, it's either going to go well or it doesn't. And then you work from there. You know, there's no point in overthinking what you want to say.
Brilliant. And what's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Everything sucks. No. That there's no that's not the word. There's no I can't think of the word. So basically the idea is I'll describe the idea and see if we can workshop the word here. Amy Schumer, the famous American comedian, got Last Comic Standing 3 years into comedy. Bert Kreischer, 6 months into comedy, got a six-figure development deal with Will Smith. Bobby Lee got past the San Diego Comedy Store 9 months into comedy. A lot of the guys I listened to, Tom Segura, Ryan Sickler, a lot of the UK comedian. Oh yeah, Jimmy Carr. Jimmy Carr got paid on one of his first gigs. Like he never done comedy before, and then all of a sudden he did like 2 shows, and he was starting to be a paid comedian. And then like Johnny Vegas and all these other people worked for years with nothing, and then all of a sudden it happened. So it's either like you can't compare yourself to the people who got stuff so early, and you also can't compare yourself to the people who didn't, because it's just there's no set idea, there's no set guidelines for how to do it. It's gonna happen, and it might happen soon, it might happen later, but it's gonna happen at some point, as long and that's as long as you keep working, as long as you work hard, as long as you keep putting in the necessary work, people will see that. And that's the life lesson I got from comedy.
I will keep working hard. It's motivational.
Just cut that, put that on repeat for an hour.
No, for real. No, all jokes aside, I need to hear that. Thank you, man. Yeah. Final question: do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Just go to watch comedy, support your local comedy, because the thing at being a local comedian is just so brutal, because you're dying to have people show up to your show. So just show up to an open mic. It might be amazing, it might be crap, but just show up anyway. Be there for people. But yeah, I don't have. You can check out the Storytime podcast at Storytime, STOURY time pod everywhere. You can find me everywhere at Max Kaczor, KACZOR, C as in cat, Z as in zebra, OR or zebra, OR. Yeah, I got some shows. I think they're on my website, maxkaczor.com. I have one show, and it's this Friday. So
fantastic.
When does this come out?
Oh, this won't come out for a while.
Yeah, all right.
It will have happened, and you will have smashed it and become.
And it was amazing. It was an amazing time. I now have a development deal.
Yeah.
I'm on tour. But just check out everything. Follow me on social media. You'll find stuff there.
Absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being such a great guest. And
a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, you're always welcome on the show again. And thank you. And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.